Ooh, that's on a slant. Oh! Hello and welcome back to my channel Living on a Kidney. Today I'm going to talk about my journey and where did it all start. So I'm going to basically do a quick overview of the 13 years before my transplant, from the day I was diagnosed with my condition to the point I started to prepare and go into hospital for tests and prepare for the big day for the transplant. I'm going to be talking about how I was feeling, how I got to understand my condition and how was I preparing myself, but also talking about my symptoms and looking back, how and when did it all click? When did I understand that I was ill? So let's get straight into it. The beginning of this journey all started when I was only 2 weeks old. I was diagnosed with sepsis at 2 weeks. I was rushed into hospital. My parents took me into my local hospital in Carmarthen called Glangwili Hospital. Because they took me in the night, they had to call a specialist doctor to come in that evening because I was so ill. I had a high temperature and I was bloated or swollen, and he managed to not only diagnose me but also save my life. He managed to realise it was sepsis that was taking over my body, and he suggested for me to be transferred from Glangwili to a better facility in Cardiff, in the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff. They took me there and they managed to control the sepsis, and from there they transferred me to the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in London, where they managed to recover my body and managed to get rid of most of the sepsis. Unfortunately, they realised as well I lost one of my kidneys. The sepsis got hold of one of my kidneys and also affected the other one. But fortunately for me, they managed to save that kidney and managed to keep it at about 50% efficiency, or keeping it going. And for 13 years I lived on that one kidney, and it didn't click to me until later on in my life that I was ill, and it was all done because of my symptoms and how this condition affected me. So I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease from 2 weeks old, basically, from a young age. It didn't click to me until further on in my journey about that I was an ill person. So growing up as a young patient, a child, basically born with this condition, I didn't have anything to compare it with. I didn't have a healthy me to compare my ill me. So symptoms and the effects of chronic kidney disease or chronic kidney failure didn't click until post-transplant. And but looking back, and while I was in the journey in the 13 years, some factors of my illness was very prominent, very obvious, and two of them were about growth and development. So one of them was appetite and food. So I didn't like food at all growing up. Couldn't eat anything really. For example, I would come back from school. Me and my brother would come back from school. Parents would do sandwiches and tea, just to keep us going till supper. And usually I would have one half of the sandwich and then hide everything else under the crust. So that's one example of not eating and how I would get away with it. But also eating a packet of crisps. I couldn't eat the full packet. Even a chocolate bar would be, I would give that a miss. Like any snacking, there was no such thing as snacking growing up because I didn't even eat anything. But I didn't have any interest in food. Sitting down on the dinner table, I was always the last one to eat. I would have the child's plate and a small meal, even struggle to eat that. Growing up, when I was a baby as well, my grandparents, well, talking to them now, and every time we mention about food, like I eat so much now they keep comparing me to my younger me. And growing up, when I was only a baby, basically, they would take me on a car journey with a pot of grapes, or drop into McDonald's for a pack of like chicken nuggets from McDonald's, and just feed me while they drive me around the place, specifically to train stations, because I love my transport. If you know me, you know that I love my motorsport and cars and transport, anything with wheels. And they used to take me to the train station to watch the trains down in my local seaside town of Ferryside, and they would be there just feeding me with chicken nuggets and chips, or chicken nuggets from McDonald's, not the chip, and while I was just watching the trains. Even that was a struggle, apparently. But yeah, food and me didn't go hand in hand. Primary school, even I can remember, when it comes to lunchtime, everybody has to finish their food before going out for their lunch break. So I was always the last one, so everybody would be counting on me to finish. And every time the dinner lady would turn around and go into the kitchen, I would run up with my plate to the food bin and put all the food into the bin, and then we would all go out to play. So all those little things, I know, shows how bad I was eating. Even secondary school, I didn't like canteen meals when it came to secondary school, because the amount of people was I had a big of a it took me a while to settle into my secondary school, because my primary school was only 36 of us in the whole school, and there was only 5 of us in the final year in primary school. So moving to secondary school with 900 plus students up to 18 years of age, it hit me hard. And going to canteen, I didn't like it. Felt self-conscious, especially when I didn't eat. So sandwiches was my option, and I couldn't even eat that. So eating was no option. But also self-confidence, I had massive trouble with my self-confidence, because, and I still do, and that'll be a different video, and it hit me hard over lockdown period. But self-confidence has always hit me quite hard, because growth and development has always been a massive factor in my condition. Because growing up, I was tiny. I was very small, hardly no weight on me, very slim, thin, very unhealthy looking, looking and very unwell. So growing up, growth was a massive factor. So I've always been known for being small, and yes, I'm still small, but I have grown and developed since my transplant. So, and I've stopped growing, developing now, because I'm basically an adult, being 23. And so growing up, I've always been small. Playing rugby, I was the small one on the pitch. And this is all because, really, of, yes, my family is quite small anyway, but it didn't help that my growth and development was affected majorly by my kidneys, because with growth and development, muscle growth especially, toxins like the creatinine levels in the blood increase when muscles and stuff grow. So kidneys clean the blood, and when my development came to it, my kidney couldn't do it. So my growth my growth just was non-existent, basically. So growing up, I was always a small one. Hitting the secondary school, I was very self-conscious because of my height, and that didn't help a lot of things. But I was identified as being small. So on the rugby pitch, I was called Ben Bach, which means small Ben, but also Bentich. So these nicknames, I liked them at the point when I was given them, because it was almost rugby camaraderie, like people are named by nicknames on rugby fields, But then with Bentich, it was one of those names that stuck with me through secondary school, and it wasn't only for the rugby field. It managed to evolve across a number of years. So even 2 years older than me and 2 years younger would know about me because I was Bentich. So when I was, say, for example, year 10, that name really affected me, because I didn't mind people calling me it if you were my close friend, a friend of mine who played rugby with me, because that was the aim of it. But when people call you from certain ages, even younger people, it made me feel very unconfident, made me feel ashamed about my height, and so on. And at this point in time as well, I had the transplant and I was growing and developing, but then, I was catching up and people were, my secondary school were mainly rugby, being in Wales, being West Wales specifically. Everybody's rugby mad. Gym is, everybody goes to the gym after school. So rugby mad school. A lot of farmers. I'm from a farming community as well. So everybody was bigger, muscular, everything. And then there was me, catching up. But I never caught up. I'm still quite small. So it affected me very mentally, as well as just self-confidence. So that symptom of not growing and developing was one of those ones that just always been there, and I can remember that from such a young age. And I will go into further detail about my self-confidence and mental health, because it's had a massive knock over the years. Lockdown hasn't helped, but yeah, so looking back, those two are the main ones I can think about as I remember them. If I was a kid, I remember them and got to know those effects, growth and development and appetite, while growing up. But it wasn't until post-transplant I recognised the other factors, such as looking ill. So looking back on photos, I look ill. When you have a hangover or just a bug, you look ill. You're a bit green or in the face or white. So I always looked like that. And also another factor was basically lack of energy. Even though I had energy to play rugby and play with my mates, and I was very fortunate to have that energy because I managed to make a lot of friends, and I had the energy to take part in things. But comparing it now, because I've got the option of comparing this now, I have a bit more energy now being this side than before the transplant. So yeah, there are many other factors, but because I was such a young patient, I don't remember them really. But unfortunately, like I've said in the previous video, transplants aren't cures. So maybe in the future, I hope not, I really hope not, but maybe I will have to I might go through that, the life before the transplant again, and I might understand other symptoms because I'm so much older now and mature, and I understand my condition. So I do apologise if you want to know more about that, but I can still explain more other conditions, specifically not about myself, but other illness you can expect from chronic disease in a separate video. But as I said, this is just an overview of my own symptoms and my own patient journey. Later years. So the later years were basically when I started to click and understand that I was very ill, and at this time as well was the time I started to change and develop into supposed to start changing and developing into a teenager. And at this time, when you're 10 years old or 9 years old, around that age, your body's starting to change and the toxins started to come through. My kidney couldn't cope, so my results started to just flop. All my kidney functionality and efficiency just didn't work, and this was a turning point when doctors and consultants started to think, right, this is a transplant, it's time for the transplant, or start preparing for it. So both parents, mum and dad, both wanted to give a kidney, and I was very fortunate because both were good matches, and unlike a lot of people, a lot of parents, they won't hesitate to give a kidney or an organ, but not everybody can give because you have to be a perfect match. And I was very fortunate, both were good matches, but mother was the best. And when we decided on the donor, both patient and donor go into tests, heart tests, and then tests around my blood vessels, and also just understanding the procedure. And one of the big tests during this point, especially for kidney transplantees, is usually they do a test on the bladder. And the bladder test is when they just basically fill the bladder and see how efficient it is in emptying it, really. Just a simpler way to explain it. And this was the first time I had the full experience of actually being in hospital for a week, being on different apparatus, cannula, catheters, all the shenanigans and all the bits. So this was the first experience of being in hospital, and it didn't go to plan the test because I failed the test. My bladder was too small for the transplant, and with this it came a debate then, because surgeons and the doctors, the consultants, all wanted me to have an operation on the bladder before the transplant, because if I went just for the transplant, my bladder could affect the kidney. But my parents were strong and decided no, they wanted to just go for the transplant and deal and believe there was another option with the bladder, which was double voiding. So double voiding is a term used when you go to the toilet, and instead of just going to the toilet and leave, you go to the toilet and you spend time there, just make sure you've emptied everything. So that's what they wanted to do, and by doing that you don't go through an operation, and it's a double voiding. I've tried to think about it as a good habit, because everybody could do a double voiding, because it's a good habit for everyone, because you make sure you're empty. So my parents stuck with that, and fortunately we managed to go ahead with the transplant without having the operation on the bladder. So double voiding is what I do, and that could be a different video to do it, which could help you to empty yourself, because it's a nice little habit to get into. So following on from that, we all agreed that the bladder situation was going to go with the double voiding instead of just going through the operation, which could affect myself when it comes to transplant, or the operation could go wrong and maybe the transplant would go off and I'll have to go on dialysis. So there was a lot of risk in that, and at this time my kidney was failing rapidly, so we had to do a correct decision. So transplant was go, basically, green light for the transplant, and for that last couple of months you get regular visits by nurses and consultants to the house to prepare you for the transplant. And at this time I was given I was given a date a year before the transplant, so you were prepared over that year. I was prepared for the day, but nothing prepares you emotionally. So the emotions I went through was up and down. So you had the excitement when you had the phone call and so on, and then come closer to the day of the transplant, 2 weeks for example, me and my mother, father and my brother, all of us in the house were up all night, worried. And the thing with a transplant or any operation, it's the uncertainty of it, so that keeps you up at night. But when doctors and nurses come round and talk to you about the transplant and what they brought with them, apparatus and stuff you would expect when you wake up from the transplant, what would be attached to you. So with all this preparation and they giving us this information, it does settle you down a bit. But the best thing is to do at that time, preparing for the transplant, is just talk with other patients, because I didn't get the chance to do that because I was so young. But my mother, she was able to talk a lot with other donors, and she felt very relaxed and come closer to the day. But then again, it's a big operation and it's very uncertain. But you can't tell someone what's going to happen. It's all about preparation, and make sure if you're in this process now of preparing for a transplant, prepare as well you can, just understand what can go wrong. That's you know, like, I try to avoid that. I avoid preparing what can go wrong, but you'll be a stronger person if you know what can go wrong than what can go right, if that makes sense. So prepare what can go wrong, enjoy when everything goes right. So I think that's a good way to end this vlog. I've covered everything, the 13 years of my condition, my symptoms, and how I was feeling, and I just hope it'll give you a bit of understanding of the 13 years. It wasn't a nice, looking back, it wasn't a nice place to be. Even though I played rugby and enjoyed a lot of time with my friends, I think the only thing I miss from my previous life is playing rugby. But even that, because I'm so small, I don't think I'll cope a minute on the field if I played rugby now. So tag rugby it is. So thank you all for watching this video. Like I said, it was just an overview. Next video will be the transplant, the big day and the big year, because the transplant, when you think of the transplant, it's more than just that day or that couple of hours in the surgery. It's the last 10 years almost, but that year is full of tests and regular checkups, and it's always up and down as well, and anything can happen in a transplant day. So stay tuned. Like I said, if you follow me on social media, try to post every Monday. Thank you all for watching and sticking by me and this channel, Living on a Kidney. Don't forget to comment, social media, message me, whatever, anything you need, so anything you need to know more about, or questions, even if you want me to guide you for some support, or guide you to some specialist or whatever, please just let me know. So thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.